So now that we've collected our data, it's time to analyze it and interpret it so that we can use it for our programs. We'll talk about different ways to do that in this module of the course. We'll start with quantitative analysis. As you might guess, this is analysis of quantitative data. The most easily accessible tool for quantitative analysis is Excel, and there are many tutorials about how to use this online, as it has many different functions and can be very powerful. The first type of analysis is counts. So this is the most basic way to analyze and report data, and it's most often used for reporting outputs. It simply involves counting up the total numbers of things such as number of trainings held or number of male versus female participants. Next, percentages tell you the proportion of something occurring out of the total possible occurrences in terms of X out of 100. We use percentages often to report outcomes. However, reporting percentages can be kind of misleading. So it's best practice to report the denominator of the fraction as the end number. So for example, say you give a survey and 100% of 10 survey respondents report satisfaction with the program. So that's great, but there's actually a total of 100 program participants. So that means you're not getting a good sample of all of your program participants. In order to be a little bit more accurate when you're sharing this, it's best to make sure that people know that only 10 out of 100% out of 100 participants reported a satisfaction rather than saying 100%. The mean, the median, and the mode. So each of these measures tells you something about how close your data are together. So that's why they're called measures of central tendency. The mean will tell you the average of a set of data. So the exact center. The median will tell you the value that's in the middle of a possible range of values. And the mode is the value that happens most frequently in a set. So any of these measures can be used for a particular data set, but you might find that one or a combination of them provides you with a little bit of a better picture. And I'll give you an example of this a bit later. A little bit more advanced is an analysis method called crosstabs. And when you do analysis in Excel, you use pivot tables to do crosstabs analysis. It's a tool that can reveal a lot about your data. So it can summarize your data and then break them into categories to see differences according to certain characteristics. So if we take our satisfaction survey example again, you might want to see if there are differences between what men and women report in their answers rather than the whole lump group. Or you might want to see if there are differences in data according to socioeconomic status or from a particular region. Crosstabs can let you see these differences really easily and can reveal a lot about your data. Next, standard deviation. If you're not familiar with the term, it essentially tells you how spread apart your data are, which is in contrast to mean, median, mode measures of central tendency. So for example, let's say in a survey question, you ask participants how much funding they get through grants. The responses maybe range from $100 to $100,000, which is quite a spread, and you see that the average is $90,000, which is pretty high. So it'd be useful to know if lots of respondents are giving answers similar to $90,000, or if the answers are a little bit more spread out across the entire possible range of answers that people gave. And standard deviation analysis is a tool that can tell us if the data are close together or more spread out. And this helps us kind of triangulate and better understand things like mean, median, and mode. And then finally, inferential statistics. These are tests that can tell you if the probability of seeing some kind of effect are due to chance or if they're potentially due to your program. And there's many different types, but the most common are t-tests and correlational coefficients. T-tests can identify if there are differences in the means or the averages of two different groups, while correlational coefficients can tell you if there's a relationship between two variables. So using the funding example again, you might want to do a t-test between the average amount of funding raised for males and females to see if these amounts are different enough that it might not be due to chance. You could also test the correlation between the number of grant applications written and the amount of money raised to see if there's a relationship between the two. So generally, inferential statistics can be very powerful, but a quick note that you should make sure to learn about their limitations as well. Inferential statistics can give you a good idea about what might be causing differences in your areas of interest, but they'll only tell you about what you specifically look for and not all possible explanations for a particular effect or a particular result. So now that we've discussed quantitative data, we can talk about qualitative data as well. The main difference between qualitative and quantitative analysis is that with qualitative analysis, you're finding trends in interviews, discussions, audio-visual media, while quantitative is looking mostly at calculating numbers. Qualitative analysis is very useful, but a word of warning, it can be very time-consuming and should be done in a team to try to balance individual subjective opinions. And there are many different qualitative analysis approaches, but we'll talk about two basic ones here today. So the first is word clouds. As I mentioned before, qualitative data is often a lot of text. So services like Wordle on the internet let you enter a chunk of text and it'll make a picture of all the words in that text, making them bigger based on how often they occur. So looking at the example here, we see that some things that come out quite a lot are new skills, confidence, focus, leadership, some of these different elements. So those are things that were really important in the analysis that we conducted for this particular program. It's an easy way to visualize trends or key ideas in qualitative data, and it's easy to get started on digging deeper into other trends you see come out of the word cloud. So generally, this gives us some hints for some deeper analysis we might want to read through and check on what other trends come out of this particular set of text. Another approach is called pile sorting. In this method, you go through qualitative data and pull out key elements you think are most important. So for example, you might pull out quotes of key changes that occurred. You write these on paper, and then you sort the paper into piles, where the piles have some common element. And these piles then become domains or trends that you see through all the data. So in this picture, this is from a program which I work on, and we can see that one of our fellows is explaining which domains came out of a pile sorting analysis that was conducted on some stories of change that we collected. Pile sorting can be a very participatory approach, meaning you can involve many different stakeholders, and it's really beneficial because different stakeholder groups have different values that are useful to understand in evaluations. So moving from analysis to interpretation, they're very similar, but interpretation goes a little bit of a step further. It's more than just reporting results. It includes telling various audiences exactly what the results mean beyond the bare facts and what this means for programs as well. So interpretation basically answers the question, so what? It answers questions around how the findings fit in or maybe contradict how we think the program is going and where you can link findings from M&E to recommendations for changes in the program if you need to. So I have a little cartoon with an example for you. How would you interpret the data that the average starting salary is $80,000? What does that mean? So what? You can think about that on your own for a second. But at first glance, it might seem like the organization has a very high starting salary for new employees. And if you think this is a good average starting salary, then maybe you would take that job. But if you analyze the data a little bit further, you can disaggregate, which means break down the data. You might find that the mode, which is the the figure that occurs most frequently is not so nice. It's $30,000. So if this were to come out of your analysis, what would that tell you? How does that affect the big picture? This is essentially showing us that quantitative analysis can benefit from having multiple different methods going on. More data and different types of analysis will give you a better interpretation of the data when you look at everything together. So we might now interpret the average as very skewed, and there are several underlying salary issues at this organization, not to mention some nepotism happening with the CEO's son. So this might not be an organization that you would actually want to work at. Interpretation for your program should focus on how and why things occur, and then make recommendations about how to continue successfully improve your results or scale up good results that you're already getting. So we've covered a lot of ground. We learned the difference between quantitative and qualitative data and analysis. We've thought about some considerations for data collection and best practices in data management. And we've talked about what to do with the data once you've collected it and the differences in qualitative versus quantitative analysis. We've thought through some different analysis methods and how those differ from interpretation. So given all of this, you can now move on to Module 6 and learn more about what to do with your data once you've processed it.